Hello, and welcome to this Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit 21 Professional Learning Session. My name is Eric Leck, and I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and Educational Technologies at CLIU 21, where we aim to help children learn. The topic for this session is the PDE SAS Assessment Center. With increasing needs to make important decisions about impactful instruction, the recently enhanced Assessment Center in our PDE SAS website can really help teachers identify strengths, areas of need, and hone those instructional decisions that will result in the greatest impact on student growth and achievement. So let's dive right in to this content so you can learn how to best use the SAS Assessment Center. A few key goals for this session. First and foremost, to define the purpose and scope of the PDE SAS Assessment Center. If you haven't visited recently, you will see some great enhancements and a lot of new content available in the Assessment Center. We're going to make sure that you're connecting standards to aligned assessment items through the Assessment Center. We're going to make sure you understand how to build a standards-aligned assessment using the Assessment Builder. And we want to make sure you can compare methods of assessment delivery based on those assessments that you're building. So first, what is this PDE SAS Assessment Center? Well, we know that within our standards aligned system in Pennsylvania, there are a number of key circles to our SAS web portal. The assessment portion of that circle has what is called the PDE SAS Assessment Center. And this is a place where you can build, deliver, and analyze assessments by searching the database of standards aligned items, or even creating your own assessment items using a step-by-step process. Again, keeping in mind that the items found in here are all standards aligned to Pennsylvania standards. Registered users can save, share, modify any assessments that they build and deliver them to students directly in an online format or using a PDF or Word version of that assessment. You'll note that when looking at the assessment questions and items available, that these items come directly from past item samplers from PSSA or Keystone, as well as past assessments. So we know that these are questions that will be very similar to what students may see or experience if they are taking any of our state level assessments. So without any further ado, we're going to dive right into using the Assessment Center. I'm going to jump in using a link to our PDE SAS website. If you're watching this video on YouTube, you'll note in the description below that there is a link to the presentation for this session, and that presentation will include direct links to all the sites that you need. So we jump into our SAS web portal at pdesas.org. And you'll see when I dive in that I am logged into my SAS portal. The Assessment Center is only available to users that are registered users. If you are not registered, up here in the top right corner, you will have a space where you can register for an account, where you will need to include your PPID and use your school issued email address to create your account. This provides security to that assessment center. So to access that PDE SAS Assessment Center, we first want to select the assessment area of this SAS portal, and specifically the Assessment Center. You'll see when you access the Assessment Center, again being logged in, you will have the option to build an assessment, create an assessment item, view any saved assessments that you created, or view and create check for understanding quizzes for students. We're going to start by learning how to build an assessment. So I'll click on that Build an Assessment link. When I click that, you will see that we have a space where we are going to search for assessment items. Along the left-hand side, you will have filters to use to help you hone your search. Each course, as we search, want to look for questions that have been part of the PDE SAS Assessment Bank. If you have created any of your own items, you could also select to include those in your search. Next, you'll see that you can filter by grade level, selecting one or more than one grade level at a time. This is a dynamic filter in that it will automatically start showing you results as you begin working with the filter. You can select specific subject areas with PA standards aligned content. If you are a high school teacher or teach in a Keystone aligned course or a course that previously was designated for Keystone alignment, you will find that you can find those specific courses here as well to select. You have options to select the types of questions you want to search for, from constructed response, multiple choice, open-ended, text-dependent analysis, etc. You can also look for specific assessment features or specific standards right here in the filter. So as you see, I selected 7th grade English Language Arts. And as I take a look to the right, you'll see that there are a number of questions that have come up. These questions and assessment items are always standards aligned, where you can select the standard itself, and it will take you to that specific standard. Within that assessment item, you'll also notice it shows you where this item came from. As you can see, this first question is from the 2019 item sampler. Sometimes you'll see just a single date here, and that might tell you that it came from the actual assessment in that year. But often you'll see the item samplers or years that these assessment items were developed and created. So as I review, I can determine which questions I might want to add to my assessment. So I'll use an example here and just click this Add to My Assessment, and it will move it directly into an assessment bank for me. You see here that now I have one item in my assessment. Maybe as I am reviewing the questions, I do want to pick a specific standard to review. So I can do that. You'll see that here in this ELA area, if they have a reading passage, there might be multiple questions aligned to that assessment. And you could add the passage and questions individually by using those associated questions, or at the very top, you can add the entire passage and all questions associated. So you see now I have 9 items in my assessment. I may decide that I want to add a specific type of assessment. Maybe I want to add a text-dependent analysis question. Change my standard. And you'll see that those text-dependent analysis questions do come up as well. You'll see that there is no multiple choice on those. The last component here is the actual instruction about the passage that a student should write. So we can add those to an assessment as well. So we can certainly use the assessment builder itself, provided we know our standards and what we are looking for to include in our assessment. This may work well if I am creating a generalized subject area assessment, where I might be doing a pre-test at the beginning of the year or over a quarter of the school year, where I'm trying to pick and choose multiple standard areas to address. This may also work if I am looking specifically for maybe 1 or 2 questions in a specific standard area. I can come here and directly get to those. However, the assessment builder area is not the only place where you can start to find these questions. In fact, it may be best for you to take a look directly at your standards and the scope of all of those standards to determine what questions you want to select. So you'll see here, I went to the standards tab and want to view my standards, I'm going to go back to that 7th grade ELA area. And you'll see now that I can access the standards themselves and go from the standard to assessment questions that are aligned to that standard. If I want to dig down even deeper and go into specific eligible content, I can do that as well by selecting that eligible content box and selecting the assessment link directly with specific eligible content. You'll see when I do that, it will take me back into my assessment builder. I want to keep those questions that I put in before, and I could use those directly. Another way that you might use this is to determine if students have adequate readiness to enter into grade level content. So you might be a 7th grade teacher, but want to determine if your students have those 5th and 6th grade skills that they might need to enter into 7th grade standard instruction. To do that, I might use my vertical viewer under the Standards tab. Again, Standards tab, vertical viewer. Select my current grade level and subject area. You'll see here that it then breaks down to the specific diagnostic categories within that grade level and subject area. So I may select one of those categories. And now in the vertical viewer, it will highlight in the center my current grade level and allow me to see the grade levels around it. So if I'm looking for prerequisite skills, I might want to select and even use this arrow to move back 6th grade or 5th grade standard area content and find assessment questions that align in that way to add to my assessment. This way I'll be able to determine if my students are prepared to enter grade level content, or if I might need to do a little bit of remediation to help prepare them a bit more. So I'll add that to my assessment as well. So as you can see, we've spent some time building an assessment. Now that this assessment is built, you see that I have 20 items in it. I can go ahead and view my assessment. You see here that the assessment has a student version, a teacher version, and an answer key. Within that student version, you'll be able to preview the order in which the assessment is presented. And if you would like, you can move the question order. You may also remove questions or sections as necessary. So maybe as you're reviewing, you determine that you want to remove a specific item. Now, within each version, I'm going to have some great options on how I can, what I can do with the assessment itself. So I'm going to use that options tab or options button at the top right to first save my assessment. I want to make sure that I can get back to this assessment if I need to, make adjustments later, etc. So that's going to be under Save My Assessment. You'll see here too that you can add additional assessment items. So maybe if you previewed and determined you want to add a little bit more, you can go right back into the assessment builder to find more. So I'm going to save this assessment. I need to give it a title. You can add specific student instructions. You can add teacher instructions that you may want to have in the case that you will be sharing this with other teachers. Click Save there. And now this has been saved to my collection. Something else we can do is we can export this assessment. So again, I'm on the student version first. If I click Export to PDF, this will create a PDF version of the assessment. Depending on the size and length of the assessment, it may take a little bit of time to create and download. When we do this export, it will download. Depending on the browser you're using, you'll need to make sure you know where those downloads go. I'll click on it here to show you that this would be a format that you can print, or you could save this PDF and include it in an online learning management system to share with students. And deliver. So in this sort of delivery method, it is highly recommended that as the teacher, you consider how you might create an answer form for students so that this multiple page assessment might have an answer form that students would fill out that might be one page and a little bit easier for quick grading. Okay. Now we could also export this as a Word document, which would allow for making specific edits if you choose to do that. You can add these to your ePortfolio in SAS if you choose to do so. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the check for understanding results in a little bit, but I'm going to remind you that that is here as well. So again, once we've created our assessment within the assessment center, we want to make sure we save it so that we will always have it in our own assessment bank, as well as know that we can export it to Word or PDF to deliver to students. When we do export to PDF or Word, we want to make sure that we don't just export the student version, but also possibly those teacher versions with answer keys. And note that that teacher version not only shows you the correct answers, but also make sure that you know what standard it was aligned to so that you can determine which standards might need additional addressing in your instruction. All right, so I'm going to go back to my general assessment center. We talked about building an assessment. Now, because we've built an assessment and saved it, we can now find it in that View My Assessments box. So you'll see here a list of all assessments you've created are here. When you've created an assessment, so again, I just did that ELA general check-in, I can now edit this, share it, or even duplicate it. Maybe I want to duplicate it to make different versions, make modifications from one version to the next, etc. Sharing it will allow me to add an email address of a colleague who would then also be able to get a copy of this. Edit will allow me to go back in and make changes as needed. Or of course, I can delete this. Something else that we can do directly in your own assessment bank is you can use the assessments you've created to build a check for understanding online assessment. You'll see that this is available here within your own assessments, as well as within the assessment center under Check for Understanding. A Check for Understanding will be an online web-linked version of the assessment. This is great for a small number of questions that are multiple choice. The Check for Understanding within the SAS portal, and this is a very important point, does not collect personally identifiable student information. So students will not be putting their names, student IDs, student numbers on the test. So the results that you get will give you a general idea of your students, the students in your class understanding of material, but it won't tell you specifically from one student to the next who did what on which quiz. Okay, so I'll restate that. This Check for Understanding does not collect personally identifiable information for any specific students. There is no place for a student to log in, add their name, add a student ID. So the results that you get will be very general to the whole class and not to an individual specific student. To show you how to create that Check for Understanding, remember first, you must already have built an assessment. You must have something in your own bank to work from. We create a new Check for Understanding. We will select the assessment that we want to use. I'm going to use this grade 7 ratio check-in. We may do this as an exit ticket. You will give an end date. So when is this due by? You can even select a specific time that is due by. You can tell the quiz to show answers to students after they submit, so students can check how they did themselves, and create. So once this has been created, the exit ticket ratio lesson, you will be able to get a link directly to that quiz to share with students. You can put this in a Google Classroom, you can put this in another learning management system, and what students will see when they select that link is the quiz itself. As I said before, there is no place for a student to add personally identifiable information. It will just allow them to quickly answer these questions. So these check for understandings are really best used for those exit tickets or that quick check so that you can determine within your class how well as a class they understand what might have been presented. When I submit the assessment as the student, now I can go and check my answers as well. Now, from a teacher perspective, when you are in this check for understanding, after students have completed, you will be able to view those results very quickly. So you'll see here this ratio exit ticket I had set up previously. I can view the results, shows me how many students have responded, shows me that it's still active, the students might still be answering, but I can see for each question, the number of students that may have selected each of the different answers and where the most students have answered it. So I can see here in question number 1 that they seem to be able to make this correlation pretty well for the most part in my class. You can see that it is based on a 6th grade standard. Number 2 as well. Again, looks like students are understanding this as well, 6th grade standard. And then in number 3, it looks like they struggle a little bit more on this type of question. So I might want to address that more. Now, again, maybe I use this as a pre-test, a pre-check before I give the lesson. And that tells me as a teacher that this might be an area that I want to address a little bit more before we get into this grade level content. So quick check allows us to get that overall information, but not student specific information, check for understanding. Now, the final portion of our assessment center, of course, is creating our own assessment items. This is where you can add your own questions directly into the assessment. So again, notice here that you can select the type of item that you want to create. You can give it a name specifically, keywords so that it can be tagged. You need to give it a grade level, a subject area, and a course. It will ask you to align it to standards and to provide a depth of knowledge range. And then it will ask you to put the question itself in. So you do need to follow the full process to make sure that you add these. So maybe you're adding a question that you pulled from another bank, but you want to have it available to you here. That would be a great way to use this as well. So that takes us through the different parts of our assessment center in PDE SAS. Some final tips and reminders. As you jump into that assessment center, please consider your purpose and approach to building your assessments. Think about it. Do you want to have a quick check for understanding, exit ticket, formative assessment? Are you building a pre-test, a diagnostic test to determine what students know coming into a unit of study or even a course? Maybe you're creating a post-test to see how students are understanding what you've already instructed. You also want to consider, are you looking to go from a standard specifically, and maybe that you start in the standards area and move to the assessment questions? Are you looking for prerequisite skills where you might use that vertical viewer? Are you looking for something more general where you might start directly in the assessment builder and filter from there? I remind you to save your assessments so that you can make multiple versions, modifications as you need to. Build your library of assessments as you need. Make sure that you think about how you might create an answer form for students when you are using that export to PDF or Word version of an assessment. And finally, don't hesitate to share once you are in your own pocket of assessments. You can share those assessments with other grade level or subject area teams so that you can use this to build some possible common assessments. If you do need help with the assessment center, you'll see that there is a link here, and I will show you, to our PDE SAS Help Center with tutorials on how to use that assessment center. So I want to make sure that you have that link. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see in the description below the link to the presentation where you will be able to go right to those help resources. And I thank you very much for your attention today. I hope this was helpful and gives you a great overview of the PDE SAS Assessment Center. I hope that you'll find some great ways to use that in the future. Have a great day.